A hush fell over the glass-walled boardroom of Novatech Industries, the tallest tower in downtown San Francisco. The city glittered below like a sea of diamonds, but the tension inside could cut through steel. "Are you telling me," said Clara Monroe, her voice dipped in cold disbelief, "that a custodian thinks he can fix a $10 million prototype?" Every head turned toward the doorway. There stood Eli Turner, a mop bucket beside him, hands still rough from years of labor. He froze, a mix of shock and quiet defiance flickering behind his eyes. His blue uniform, wrinkled and stained with machine oil, stood in stark contrast to the sleek suit surrounding him. Clara adjusted her platinum watch, letting it catch the light. "Tell me, Eli," she sneered, "do they teach advanced robotics repair when you're cleaning restrooms?" A few executives laughed nervously. No one dared look directly at Eli, as though acknowledging him might threaten their careers. Clara walked toward him, the sound of her heels echoing off the marble floor. She was everything the tech world admired, young, brilliant, and ruthless. At 37, she'd built Novatech into a billion-dollar company. But her empire was cracking. On the table lay the heart of the company's future, the Helios engine, an AI-powered generator designed to fuel autonomous vehicles with unmatched efficiency. It was the machine that was supposed to redefine clean energy transportation. Except it didn't work. Not even a little 6 weeks. 5 engineering teams, millions of dollars in diagnostics. Every attempt had failed. And now, under the sharp glow of the boardroom lights, it sat motionless, a monument to human arrogance. Clara smirked. "You know what, Mr. Turner? Let's make this interesting." Eli's grip tightened on the mop handle. "If you can repair this engine, this thing that MIT and Stanford couldn't solve, I'll make you lead engineer. Full salary. Your own team. Everything you've ever dreamed of." She paused, letting the words hang like bait. "But when you fail, and you will, you're fired. Today." The executives shifted in their chairs. Nobody spoke. This was cruelty disguised as opportunity, and everyone knew it. "Do we have a deal?" she asked. Eli looked up, meeting her gaze. His voice was steady. "If you want me to try, ma'am, I'll need a few things." And some silence. The room burst into murmurs. "A janitor giving orders?" Clara smiled with wicked amusement. "Oh, this will be good." Outside, the city buzzed with the sound of ambition. But inside Eli's mind, time slowed. For 3 years, he had swept these floors, repaired broken chairs, and fixed flickering lights. Always invisible, always underestimated. His employee ID said facility technician, but no one knew he held a degree in mechanical engineering from a community college in Oakland. He could have gone further. He should have, but when his little sister fell sick, tuition became a dream he couldn't afford. He took whatever job paid the bills, promising himself it was temporary. That was 5 years ago. Now here he stood, surrounded by a room full of people who saw him as less than human. He placed his mop aside, walked toward the Helios engine, and whispered to himself, "All right, old friend. Let's see what story you're trying to tell." The executives watched in awkward silence as Eli bent over the massive metallic sphere. The faint smell of burnt circuits lingered in the air. He could see what others missed: the subtle scorch marks, the microfractures in the casing, the faint hum of energy that still pulsed beneath the surface. His fingers brushed over the surface like a pianist testing keys. "Stop pretending you know what you're doing," someone muttered from the corner. But Eli didn't respond. He was listening. The soft rhythmic vibration under his hand told him more than any diagnostic screen could. There was something wrong, not with the hardware, but with its heartbeat. Clara crossed her arms, watching. "You have 2 hours, she said. Then security escorts you out." Eli nodded. Inside his chest, his heart thudded, not with fear, but with purpose. For a moment, he remembered the small garage where it all began. Detroit, 2001. His grandfather, Raymond Turner, had worked 30 years at General Motors before opening his own shop. Ray was a legend in the neighborhood, the man who could make an engine sing again with nothing but a wrench and intuition. "Engines talk, boy," Ray used to say. "You just gotta shut up long enough to listen." Eli was 10 when he first felt it, the way a motor's rhythm carried emotion, how the smallest vibration told the truth about what was broken. His grandfather called it mechanical empathy. That garage had smelled like oil, steel, and hope. But years later, the sign outside Turner Auto Repair faded. After Ray's heart attack, Eli had to grow up overnight. Back in the boardroom, he looked at the Helios engine and heard his grandfather's voice echo. Don't fix the parts. Fix the harmony. Hours earlier, the entire engineering department had sat defeated. They'd tested every algorithm, recalibrated every sensor, rewritten code until their fingers cramped. Nothing worked. The Helios engine would run for exactly 15 minutes and 4 seconds, then crash with the same message. Frequency misalignment detected. They blamed the AI. They blamed the heat sensors. Some even blamed magnetic interference. But no one thought to question the harmony between the machine's parts, the way metal, current, and rhythm might be clashing unseen. Now Eli stood in front of it, the entire company's future resting on his shoulders. He found a loose connection behind the main core and frowned. The coupling was machined in Germany, using metric measurements. But the AI calibration chip, he recognized the coding interface. It was developed in the US using imperial units. It wasn't broken. It was bilingual. The machine was trying to communicate in 2 different languages. Of course, he whispered. That's why it's fighting itself. But before he could act, Clara's voice pierced the silence. Time's running, janitor. He didn't look up. It's not the AI, he said calmly. It's the rhythm. The frequencies are off by less than a millimeter, but that's all it takes to destroy balance. The engineers exchanged puzzled looks. One of them, Andrew Mills, lead technician, spoke up. That's absurd. We checked the calibration hundreds of times. You checked the math, Eli said, not the feel. The room erupted in whispers again. But one person didn't laugh. In the front row sat Dr. Lena Reyes, a world-renowned engineer and consultant brought in from Tokyo. Her reputation for precision was legendary, and now her sharp brown eyes were fixed on Eli. Explain, she said simply. Eli met her gaze. If a system is built with one measurement and managed with another, even a microscopic difference becomes a ripple. The engine's AI is trying to fix a problem that isn't real. It's correcting harmony that doesn't need correction. Lena's expression changed from curiosity to respect. Clara looked unconvinced but entertained. Fine, she said. Then prove it. And that's when the challenge truly began. Eli's hands moved quickly, tracing lines across the engine's blueprint. He circled specific notations and muttered to himself, his mind calculating faster than the engineer's computers. Metric precision, he whispered, meets imperial tolerance. That's the war inside you. For the first time, the crowd leaned in. The silence wasn't mockery anymore. It was anticipation. Eli straightened up. I can fix it, he said, but I'll need 15 minutes. And something to use as a dampener. A dampener? Andrew frowned. You mean a stabilizer? Call it whatever you want, Eli replied. But it's what'll make this engine remember how to breathe. Eli turned toward the engineers who stood watching, their confidence faltering. He could feel their doubt thicken the air, a living thing that pressed against his chest. But he didn't care about their stares. He had spent too many years ignored, dismissed, and invisible. Today would be different. Dr. Lena Reyes crossed her arms, her sharp gaze fixed on him. You have 15 minutes, she said softly. But if you're wrong, there's no coming back from this. Eli nodded. Then I'd better not be wrong. He moved quickly, studying the pattern of cables and sensors that webbed around the Helios engine. Beneath the hum of the power regulators, he heard it again, that uneven rhythm. It reminded him of an orchestra where one instrument played half a note too high. He crouched beside the cooling unit and whispered under his breath, You're overheating because you're fighting yourself, aren't you? No one answered, but he didn't need them to. He felt it. Every machine carried its own pulse, its own logic. His grandfather had been right. Get me a metal disc, Eli said suddenly. Something heavy, about 5 inches across. A young engineer hesitated, looking to Clara for permission. Clara gave a mocking bow. Whatever the janitor needs. Give him his toy. The engineer returned with a part from an old stabilizer, flat, circular, with small holes around the edge. Eli turned it in his hand, weighing it. Perfect, he murmured. Now let's give this engine something it understands. He began fitting the makeshift dampener into the housing frame, adjusting screws, muttering calculations that came to him faster than breath. Every movement was deliberate, precise, confident. The room had fallen silent. Even Clara's smirk began to fade as the minutes ticked away. "Why that piece?" Dr. Reyes asked. Eli glanced up. "Because you can't force harmony," he said. "You have to guide it. This will absorb the extra vibration, let the AI and the mechanical core fall into rhythm." She said nothing more, but he saw something shift in her expression. Recognition. As he tightened the final bolt, he looked up at Clara. "Start the power cycle." Her laugh came brittle and sharp. "Oh, I can't wait to see this explode." But when the machine roared to life, it didn't sputter or groan. It sang. A low, steady purr filled the boardroom, smooth as a heartbeat. The lights above flickered as energy surged through the system. Monitors flashed green. "It's stabilizing," whispered one of the engineers. "The core temperature, it's holding steady." The seconds stretched into minutes. 10, 12, 15, no shutdown, no warning codes, just the perfect hum of mechanical harmony. Dr. Reyes leaned in to read the diagnostics. Her pen stilled. 98% efficiency, she said quietly. "That's higher than theoretical maximum." Eli smiled faintly. Sometimes theory just needs a little humanity. The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Clara's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she whispered. Eli turned to her, wiping his hands on his uniform. "You said I'd fail." Before she could answer, applause broke out. Engineers who had laughed hours ago were now cheering. Even the German investors, stern men in dark suits, stood clapping. Dr. Reyes stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Turner, what you did here defies every conventional method. You saw what no one else could." He shook her hand gently. "Sometimes you just have to listen." Clara's phone buzzed as notifications flooded in. The live stream, which she'd ordered to mock him, now showed tens of thousands of viewers celebrating Eli's success. Comments rolled in faster than she could read. "Genius janitor saves the company." "Real talent wins." Corporate karma at its finest. She looked up, her voice trembling. "This isn't over." But Eli only nodded toward the glowing engine. "It never is. Machines keep teaching us the same lesson. You get out what you put in." As the cheering continued, Dr. Reyes turned to the board members. "We've just witnessed something extraordinary. I recommend Mr. Turner be promoted immediately to senior diagnostic engineer." The investors nodded in agreement. One of them, a tall man named Henrik Bauer, added, "And Novatech's funding will increase by 20 million, conditional upon him leading the next generation of our energy systems." The room exploded again, this time with pure disbelief. Eli stood still, his eyes unfocused. He wasn't thinking about titles or money. He was thinking about a small garage in Detroit, the smell of motor oil, and his grandfather's steady voice saying, "Respect the rhythm, and the machine will respect you back." And for the first time in years, he felt seen. But this victory was just the beginning. Outside those walls, a storm was brewing, one that would change the balance of power at Novatech forever. Clara Monroe's downfall had only just begun. The next morning, Novatech was everywhere. Every business channel, every news site, every trending feed carried the same headline. "Janitor outsmarts engineers, saves multi-billion-dollar company." By sunrise, Eli Turner's name had traveled farther than any memo Clara Monroe had ever signed. Within hours, his quiet victory had become a worldwide phenomenon. But inside Novatech's headquarters, the mood was split clean down the middle. Half awe, half panic. Executives scrambled through the hallways, whispering about investor calls, media requests, and what this meant for the company's reputation. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a scandal. And at the center of it all, Clara sat in her office, staring at the glowing headlines on her screen. The reflection of the words, "Employee humiliated by CEO triumphs publicly," burned in her eyes like accusation. Her assistant peeked through the doorway. "Ma'am, the board meeting's in 10 minutes. Clara didn't look up. "Tell them I'm aware, downstairs." The boardroom that had once witnessed Eli's humiliation was now crowded with people who couldn't decide whether to celebrate or prepare damage control. Dr. Lena Reyes stood by the window, calm as ever, reviewing the technical report. Eli entered quietly, still wearing the same faded uniform. He looked uncomfortable under the weight of so many eyes, but his posture held steady. "Mr. Turner," said one board member, clearing his throat. "Do you understand what you've accomplished here?" He smiled faintly. "I fixed an engine, The room chuckled softly, but Lena spoke over them. No, you didn't just fix a machine. You exposed a culture that refuses to see talent unless it wears a title. The silence that followed was heavy and sharp. Even Clara felt it in her bones. Henrik Bauer adjusted his tie. We agree with Dr. Reyes. Novatech needs new direction and leadership that listens. His gaze flicked toward Clara. She stiffened. You can't be serious. You're basing board decisions on a viral clip? Henrik's voice was calm, but it carried steel. We're basing it on results. 6 weeks of failure from your top engineers versus 2 hours from the man you mocked. Numbers don't lie. Lena placed the final report on the table. The efficiency is real. His solution works. And the design integration he proposed could redefine our energy systems. Clara's composure cracked. He's not qualified. He doesn't even have a degree from a major university. Eli finally spoke, his voice quiet but cutting through the air. You're right. I don't, I just have experience. And patience. Things machines seem to value more than people do. Someone at the table murmured, Amen to that. Clara's jaw tightened. You think this little fairy tale makes him fit for leadership? Henrik leaned forward. No, his actions do. He turned to Eli. Mr. Turner, we'd like to offer you a permanent engineering position, effective immediately. Title, Senior Systems Developer. Full salary, full authority. You'll lead the harmonic integration project. Gasps echoed across the room. Eli froze, unsure how to react. Sir, I don't even know what to say. Lena smiled. Say yes and start changing things, he nodded slowly. Then yes. The board members clapped politely, but the applause felt like thunder in Clara's ears. She forced a smile, brittle and hollow. Wonderful, she said, her tone wrapped in venom. Let's all celebrate the janitor who saved the day. No one laughed this time. When the meeting ended, she stormed down the corridor, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. Reporters had already gathered in the lobby. Flashing cameras followed her every step. A voice shouted, Ms. Monroe, any comment on the discrimination claims? She froze. What claims? The reporter held up a tablet showing screenshots of internal emails, the ones she thought would never see daylight. Lines of cruel jokes, references to the cleaning guy, and even her own words. Some people belong with a mop, not a motherboard. Her stomach dropped. Those were taken out of context, she said quickly. It was workplace humor. But the words sounded wrong even to her own ears. Behind the crowd, Eli appeared, calm, collected, eyes tired but clear. The photographers swung toward him instantly. Mr. Turner, shouted another voice. Do you plan to press charges? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, I didn't come here to ruin anyone. I just wanted the machine to work. The simplicity of his words disarmed everyone. Cameras clicked. People murmured. As Clara slipped into her car, her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from investors, legal advisors, and one message from the board. Emergency leadership review scheduled. Attendance mandatory. She closed her eyes, gripping the steering wheel. Everything she'd built, the power. The image the empire was collapsing, not from sabotage, but from arrogance. Meanwhile, upstairs, Eli stood with Dr. Reyes in front of the now perfectly running Helios engine. It's still strange, he said softly. I can't get used to people looking at me like I matter. You've always mattered, Lena replied. They just finally opened their eyes. He smiled faintly. You think they'll keep them open this time? She looked at the engine, humming in flawless rhythm. If they don't, you'll remind them. The sound of applause drifted through the hallway again. Employees gathering to celebrate. Engineers clapping him on the back. People thanking him for saving their jobs. It was surreal. For years, these same people had walked past him without a glance. He met the gaze of an intern who whispered, You made us all believe we can matter too. Eli nodded slowly. Then that's the real fix. But the story wasn't over yet. Because while the company celebrated, the board's investigation had just begun. And what they would find buried in the emails and decisions of Novatech's leadership would turn triumph into reckoning, and Clara Monroe was about to learn what it truly felt like to be invisible. 2 weeks later, the conference room that once held whispered mockery was now a courtroom of accountability. Every executive sat rigid in their seats while the board members sifted through files thick with evidence. There were no smiles, no idle chatter, only the low hum of tension and the weight of unfinished reckoning. At the head of the table sat Henrik Bauer, expression carved in stone. Before we proceed, he said evenly, let's be clear. What happened here wasn't a mistake. It was a culture built on arrogance. Clara Monroe looked smaller than anyone had ever seen her. Her usual sharpness had dulled. The designer suit, the posture, even the confidence, all of it had vanished. For the first time, she looked human and terrified. Lena Reyes stood beside the digital screen displaying the evidence. These emails, she said, her voice calm but merciless, reveal years of internal bias and cruelty. Not just against Mr. Turner, others too. Dozens of staff members ignored, passed over, and publicly belittled. An image of one of Clara's messages flashed across the screen. Let's keep the cleaning staff quiet during investor tours. They're bad optics. The words hung in the air like poison. Clara opened her mouth. It was sarcasm. Henrik's hand slammed the table. Enough. You ran this company with fear, not leadership. You humiliated a man who saved your reputation, and now the entire world knows it. She looked down. The silence that followed was longer than any speech. Finally, Lena turned to the board. I recommend Clara Monroe be removed as CEO and reassigned to a non-executive role until a full ethics review is complete. The vote was swift and unanimous. Clara's pen rolled off the table, the tiny click echoing louder than any gavel. Henrik leaned back. Ms. Monroe, effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties. Dr. Reyes will serve as interim CEO. No one clapped. No one smiled. The room was too heavy for celebration. As Clara gathered her things, she glanced across the table, where Eli Turner sat silently, hands folded, watching without bitterness. She searched his face for anger or triumph, but there was none. Only a quiet sadness, the kind that said, this didn't have to happen this way. When she passed him, she whispered, You've ruined me. He shook his head slowly. No, you did that yourself. She didn't respond. Outside, news cameras had gathered again. The headlines were already updating. Novatech CEO removed after viral humiliation fallout. Inside, employees began to exhale for the first time in years. The atmosphere felt lighter, the fear that used to fill every corner finally fading. Dr. Reyes turned to Eli. You understand what you've started, don't you? He frowned. I didn't start anything. You did, she said. You showed them that talent doesn't wear labels. That's the beginning of something bigger than this company. He didn't know what to say. All he could do was nod. Over the next few months, the transformation began. Novatech introduced an open-door innovation policy. Any employee, no matter their title, could submit ideas directly to leadership. Anonymous review panels were formed to eliminate bias. Training programs were rebuilt from the ground up, and at the heart of it all was Eli Turner. He didn't want fame, but it came anyway. Industry conferences invited him to speak. News outlets called him the Engine Whisperer. Students wrote letters saying his story inspired them to study engineering. Sometimes, late at night, he'd walk past the Helios engine still humming in its display room. He'd rest his hand on its smooth surface and listen to its rhythm. Steady, perfect, alive. It had become a symbol of everything he believed in, that even when systems fail, harmony can be restored with patience and understanding. Meanwhile, Clara's life had shrunk to a whisper. She was kept on as an advisor but stripped of authority. Her new office was small, windowless, tucked behind HR. She spent her days buried in paperwork, occasionally catching glances from employees who used to fear her. Now they simply walked past. Every few weeks she saw Eli in the hallway. He always nodded politely, as if refusing to treat her with the cruelty she had once shown him. The first time it happened, she couldn't sleep that night. Eventually, she knocked on his office door. He looked up from his workstation, surprised. Ms. Monroe? She hesitated before speaking. Clara, please. He gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself into the chair, clasping her hands. I've been thinking about everything. About how I led. About you. Her voice trembled. I was wrong, completely. Eli studied her quietly. I thought control meant strength, she continued. But it was just fear. Fear of losing, fear of being less. And when I saw that fear in others, I crushed it before it could remind me of my own. He didn't interrupt. Clara took a shaky breath. I'm trying to do better. I've been sitting in those diversity meetings they forced me into, thinking it was punishment. But now I see it's not punishment. It's repair. Eli smiled faintly. Machines break down for two reasons: neglect or overuse. People are the same. You just have to maintain them better. She let out a quiet laugh that almost sounded like relief. You're still teaching me lessons I should have learned years ago. He stood and extended his hand. Then learn them well. The next generation deserves better leaders. Clara shook his hand firmly. It was the first honest handshake between them. Outside the glass walls, workers moved through the halls with purpose and laughter. The company had changed, and it showed. But change, Eli knew, was never the end. It was only the start of something deeper. 3 months later, at the annual company meeting, he stood on stage beside Dr. Reyes as she announced the new global expansion partnership. The audience roared with applause when she said his name. As cameras flashed, he caught sight of Clara in the crowd. She was clapping too, her expression soft, proud even, and for the first time he didn't see arrogance in her eyes, he saw understanding. The Helios engine had found harmony. So had they. But destiny, Eli would soon learn, had more in store than any of them expected. Because when genius meets humility, the world doesn't just change, it listens. By the end of that year, Novatech had become something no one had ever imagined it could be, a place where ideas came from everywhere. The janitors debated algorithms with programmers. Interns designed prototypes that senior engineers tested. The hierarchy that once ruled the company like iron had melted away into something fluid, alive, human. Eli Turner stood at the center of it all, still humble in manner, still more comfortable near the machines than in board meetings. His name had been printed in magazines, his face broadcast in interviews, but he never let the noise distract him. When people asked what it felt like to be famous, he always gave the same answer. It feels like a second chance. He spent long nights at the new diagnostics lab, running experiments with younger engineers who hung on his every word. Don't just look at the numbers, he would tell them. Listen to what the system is trying to say. Data has tone just like a voice. They called him the listener. Dr. Lena Reyes often found him there, leaning against a workbench at 3 a.m, staring at the rhythm of a running engine as if it were a piece of music. One night, she said quietly, "You've done more than save a company. You've changed how people think." Eli smiled, tired but content. "I didn't change anything. I just reminded them what matters," she nodded. That's what change really is. Months turned into a year. Novatech's expansion into Europe succeeded beyond expectations. The Helios engine powered entire fleets of autonomous delivery vehicles across Berlin, Madrid, and Copenhagen. The efficiency numbers stunned analysts, a consistent 97%. The machine that once symbolized failure had become the beating heart of a global revolution in clean transport. One winter morning, Eli arrived at headquarters to find a thick envelope on his desk. Inside was a letter printed on textured paper with the Novatech seal at the top. He unfolded it slowly, expecting another project briefing, but instead it read, "The board of directors has voted unanimously to appoint Mr. Eli Turner as Chief Engineer of Global Systems Development." He stared at the words for a long moment before, realizing he was smiling. When he stepped into the hallway, applause erupted from every direction. Employees filled the corridor. People he had once cleaned after, people who had once looked through him. They were clapping not because he had a title, but because he had earned their respect. Later that day, he visited the Helios engine one last time before it was shipped to a European research museum as a piece of technological history. He placed a hand on its side and whispered, "You and me, old friend." We listened when nobody else did. He stood there for a long time, feeling the faint vibration under his palm. That evening, the company hosted a celebration at the rooftop garden overlooking the glowing city skyline. The air was warm, the kind of evening that made San Francisco feel endless. Music played softly in the background as people laughed and toasted. Clara Monroe approached him quietly, a glass of water in her hand, instead of the champagne everyone else held. "I didn't think I'd be invited," she said with a half smile. "You earned your way back," he replied. "I'm trying," she said. "Every day," Eli nodded. "That's all anyone can do." They stood together in silence, watching the horizon. The sky faded from gold to violet, the city lights shimmering like a constellation reborn. Clara spoke softly. "You know, the irony isn't lost on me." "What do you mean?" "You fixed a machine," she said. But somehow you fixed people too. Eli laughed under his breath. Machines are easy. People take longer. She smiled genuinely for the first time in years. You think you'll ever stop listening to engines? He looked out over the skyline. Never. But maybe now I'll start listening to people too. When the night ended and the crowd thinned, he walked alone to the balcony edge. Below him, the city pulsed like a living circuit. Every light a heartbeat. He remembered his grandfather's words, words that had guided him through every failure, every doubt, every injustice. Respect the rhythm, and it will respect you back. He closed his eyes, hearing the echo of that rhythm everywhere now. Not just in engines, but in footsteps, in laughter, in life itself. The janitor who once mopped the floors of Novatech had become the man who rebuilt its soul, and as the wind brushed against him, carrying the hum of the city, Eli Turner finally understood the truth that had been waiting his whole life to be spoken. Greatness isn't born in titles or degrees or privilege. It's born in the quiet persistence of those who listen when no one else will. The world had doubted him. The world had tried to silence him, but he'd answered with harmony. And harmony, once found, never forgets who heard it first.